The night on the outpost was always silent, broken only by the low hum of the generators. John, a maintenance worker, often stayed late, repairing broken lights and checking the power lines. But tonight was different because every time he walked past the old storage hangar, he felt eyes watching him. Everyone had warned him never to go near that hangar. They whispered stories about what was kept inside. Some said it was a monster that had killed hundreds. Others said it was a weapon too dangerous to ever be released. But all agreed on one thing. No one should feed her. No one should even speak to her. John tried to ignore it at first, but curiosity burned in his chest. He had lived on this cold outpost for years, surrounded by soldiers, workers, and endless rules. Life had become dull until he saw the shadow in the hangar. At first, it was only a glimpse, tall and still, a shape too large to be human. Then he saw the eyes, glowing faintly in the dark, watching him with a strange intensity. The giantess was locked inside a reinforced cage, built of heavy steel bars and glowing energy fields. She was taller than 3 men, her long silver hair hanging like a waterfall across her shoulders. Her skin shimmered faintly, not like human skin but smooth, flawless, alien. Chains bound her wrists and ankles, though John sensed she could break them if she truly wanted. Yet she sat there in silence, staring, waiting, like a predator too patient to strike. John felt his heart race every time he passed. One evening, he made the mistake of pausing. The giantess tilted her head slightly, as if studying him. He froze, unable to move. Then came the sound, low but clear, the rumble of her voice. "Hungry," she whispered, almost like a plea. John stumbled back, his chest tight with fear. He remembered the warnings. Never feed her, never speak, never respond. But the sound of her voice stayed in his mind, soft yet powerful. That night, he could not sleep. He lay awake, thinking of the eyes in the dark and the words she had spoken. Hungry. The next day, John tried to distract himself with work. He repaired broken panels, checked the fuel lines, and followed orders. But when evening came, his steps again led him to the hangar. This time, he carried his food pack with him. A piece of bread, some dried fruit, nothing more. He told himself it was only curiosity, nothing else. When he reached the bars, she was waiting. Her eyes glowed brighter, catching the faint light. John's hands trembled as he held out the bread. For a long moment, the giantess did not move. Then slowly, she leaned forward, the chains clinking. Her massive hand stretched through the bars, and with careful precision, she took the bread. She ate silently, her gaze never leaving him. It was not the act of a beast, but of someone who understood, someone who remembered. When she finished, she whispered again. Human, her voice echoed in the air. John's breath caught, his fear mixed with something else. Wonder. She could speak, she could think. This was no mindless creature. But then the memory of the warnings returned. If anyone saw what he had done, he would be punished, maybe even executed. He stepped back quickly, his heart pounding. Yet the giantess leaned closer to the bars, her glowing eyes narrowing. Come back, she said softly, her voice both command and request. John ran out of the hangar, refusing to look back. The night swallowed him, and the hum of the generators filled the silence again. But inside him, something had changed. The cage was no longer just a forbidden place. It was a secret he now carried, a dangerous connection he could not ignore. The next day, the workers whispered again. Never feed her, never speak to her, they warned. John nodded, pretending to agree. But in his mind, the image of her silver hair, her glowing eyes, and her voice saying come back would not fade. And deep down, he knew he would return, no matter the risk. The following night felt longer than usual. John tried to keep himself busy, fixing wires and carrying tools, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the hangar. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face in the shadows, the way her glowing eyes had followed him, the way her voice had whispered, come back. He told himself it was madness, that no sane man would go near her again. Yet when the shift ended and the workers returned to their bunks, John's feet carried him the other way, straight toward the forbidden cage. The air around the hangar was cold, the lights dim, as if the place itself wanted to keep strangers away. But she was waiting, just as before, her silver hair catching faint reflections from the security lamps, her huge body still bound in chains, her eyes fixed only on him. John's heart raced as he stopped at the bars. For a moment, neither spoke. Then her voice, deeper this time, rolled out like a wave. "You came back." He swallowed hard, his throat dry. Slowly, he pulled out the food pack he had hidden beneath his jacket, a piece of bread and a few slices of dried fruit. His hands trembled as he pushed it through the bars. The giantess leaned forward, her movements strangely graceful despite her size. She took the offering carefully, her long fingers brushing against his hand for a fleeting second, sending a chill up his arm. She ate slowly, not like a beast devouring scraps, but like someone savoring every taste. Her eyes never left his face. When the last piece of fruit was gone, she lowered her head closer to the bars. Her voice came again, steady and heavy with meaning. "Human, why?" John froze. Why had he done it? Why risk his life just to feed her? He could not answer, at least not honestly. Instead, he muttered, "Because you looked hungry." For a long time, she was silent, her gaze unblinking. Then, almost like a sigh, she whispered, "No one has ever fed me. Not once, not in all these years." Her words made his chest tighten. The outpost guards had always said she was dangerous, but in that moment she sounded almost lonely. John stepped back, shaking his head as if trying to escape the weight of her words. "This is wrong," he whispered. "If they catch me, I'll be executed." Her lips curved slightly, not into a smile, but something close, a sad reflection of one. "Then why return?" she asked, her voice a blend of challenge and curiosity. He had no answer. Perhaps it was her voice, perhaps her eyes, or perhaps the simple fact that for the first time in years, he felt alive. The silence stretched, filled only by the faint hum of the energy field around the cage. Finally, John turned to leave, but before he could step away, her voice followed him, sharp and firm. "Come back tomorrow." John froze in place, his pulse hammering. There was no request in her tone this time, only command. He looked back, and for the first time he noticed the faint scar across her wrist where the chain cut into her skin. Something stirred inside him. Pity, anger, and something far more dangerous. When he reached his quarters, he lay awake once again, staring at the ceiling. Her words replayed in his mind, echoing louder each time. "Come back tomorrow." The warning of the others also echoed. Never feed her, never speak to her. But his heart already knew what his mind refused to admit. He would return. The next evening, he found himself standing once more in front of the cage. This time he had brought more food, enough for a meal. When he offered it, she accepted without hesitation, her hands brushing his again, a spark of heat passing through the cold air. When she finished, she leaned close to the bars, her face only inches away. Her golden eyes glowed like twin suns, burning into him. "You are not like the others," she said softly. John's breath caught. "Others?" he asked before he could stop himself. Her gaze darkened, shadows passing through her eyes. "They came to see me long ago, soldiers, rulers, even kings," she whispered. "They all feared me, chained me, caged me, but none fed me." Her voice grew quieter, almost a whisper of pain. "You are the first." A shiver ran through him. He should have been terrified, yet he felt something else, something heavier, a strange connection binding them in silence. He wanted to ask more, to know who she was, why she was here, but fear of being overheard kept him silent. So instead, he only nodded, his hand pressed against the cold steel of the bars. Her massive hand lifted slowly, pressing lightly against the same spot from the other side. For a moment, human and giantess stood like that, separated by iron, united by touch. Then the sound of footsteps echoed in the distance. John jerked back, panic rushing through him. "Guards!" He turned to run, But her voice reached him one last time, low and commanding. "Do not leave me, human." The words chased him into the night, even as he slipped past the patrol and into the safety of shadows. He knew the truth. He could not stay away. She had taken more than his food. She had taken hold of his fate. The next nights passed like a secret rhythm. Every evening John found himself walking to the forbidden hangar, his heart heavy with fear, yet strangely drawn. He carried food hidden under his jacket, small offerings that seemed meaningless for a giantess. Yet each time, she accepted them with quiet grace. And each time she spoke, her voice low and calm, a voice that shook him more than the warnings of death. The bond between them grew slowly, like a spark hidden in darkness. She began to tell him fragments of her story, pieces of a past too large for him to fully understand. Her name, she said, was Sira, not a beast, not a weapon, but a warrior once feared across the stars. She had been betrayed, captured, and chained not because she was savage, but because she was strong. "They could not kill me," she whispered one night, her glowing eyes softer than before. "So they caged me." John listened, torn between awe and disbelief. The guards always said she was dangerous, but her words carried sorrow, not rage. He saw in the way she pressed against the chains on her wrists, the faint scars carved deep into her skin. He saw it in the way she looked at the night sky through the cracks in the roof, as if remembering freedom. "Why tell me this?" John asked one evening, his voice low. Her golden eyes turned to him, glowing like fire in the dark. "Because you listen," she replied simply. "Because you feed me." Her words struck something in him, something beyond fear, beyond duty. No one on the outpost had ever spoken to him like that. No one had ever looked at him as though he mattered. The days outside the hangar felt longer, heavier. He worked among the other men, repairing broken machines, nodding silently when they whispered about the beast in the cage. They laughed at the idea of her speaking, called her a monster with teeth sharp enough to crush steel. John kept silent, hiding the truth burning inside him. He wanted to shout that she was more than they imagined, but he knew the cost. If they learned what he had done, his life would end before sunrise. And yet he kept going back. Night after night, their conversations deepened. Sira spoke of worlds John had never heard of, planets filled with crystal forests, oceans that glowed in the dark, skies with two suns that burned eternal. Her voice painted pictures so vivid he could almost see them, almost believe he was standing there beside her. "You dream small, human," she said once, her voice gentle but firm. "Your people look at cages and walls, while I remember stars." John smiled faintly, though sadness pressed at him. "Stars are too far from me," he whispered. Her eyes locked onto him, fierce and bright. "Not if you walk with me," she said, her words sharp as a blade. A dangerous warmth spread through his chest. He knew she was not human, not like him. Yet every word tied him closer, every night pulled him deeper. He began to crave her voice, the way her presence filled the silence. He began to feel restless when away from her, his thoughts circling like restless birds until he returned to her cage. But danger grew with the bond. One night, as he slipped back to his quarters, he heard two guards speaking near the barracks. "They say someone's been sneaking food from the supplies," one muttered. "If it's for the beast, they'll hang him," the other replied coldly. John's blood ran cold. They were suspicious, and suspicion was enough to kill him. The next evening, he almost didn't go. He told himself it was too dangerous, that if he cared for her, he should stop. But when he walked past the hangar, her eyes found him through the dark, glowing, waiting, hoping, and he could not turn away. That night she spoke softly, her tone different, almost fragile. "You fear them," she said, her head tilted as she studied his face. "Yes," John admitted, his voice breaking. "If they find out, I'm dead." Her hand lifted, the chains clinking as she pressed her palm against the bars. "Then I will not let them touch you," she whispered, her voice low but fierce. John's breath caught. In her words, he heard a promise, a vow as unbreakable as steel. But he also heard danger, for the more he gave, the more she demanded. And he realized the truth. He was no longer feeding her out of pity. He was feeding her because he could not stop, because the bond had already taken root. As he turned to leave, she spoke once more, her voice echoing in the silent hangar. "If you stop, human, I will not forgive you." The words clung to him like chains heavier than hers. He walked away, but his heart stayed behind, locked inside the cage with her. And though fear filled him, another feeling grew stronger, a feeling far more dangerous than fear. The nights of secrecy could not last forever. Whispers began to spread in the outpost, quiet at first, then sharper, like blades carried in the dark. Food supplies were going missing. Guards complained about strange noises near the hangar, and more than once John felt eyes on his back as he slipped into the shadows. He told himself he was careful, but deep down he knew someone would notice, someone always noticed. Still he returned, because the pull of her voice, the weight of her glowing eyes, was stronger than fear. Every time he stood before the bars, he felt like the rest of the world fell away, as though only she and he remained. Syrah spoke of stars, of freedom, of betrayal, and he listened, caught in a web he no longer wished to escape. But one night, the silence outside the hangar broke. As John passed food through the bars, he heard a faint click behind him, the sound of boots on metal flooring. He froze, his breath caught. Syrah's golden eyes narrowed, sharp as a predator's. "Someone is here," she whispered. John turned, his stomach twisting. Two guards stood at the edge of the shadows, their rifles raised, eyes cold and suspicious. Well, one sneered. "Looks like we found our thief." The other spat on the ground, his voice low and harsh. "Feeding the beast? You must have a death wish." John stumbled back, his throat dry. It's not what it looks like," he tried, but his voice shook, betraying him. The guards stepped closer, the glow from their rifles illuminating his pale face. "You know the law," one hissed. "Anyone who speaks to her, anyone who feeds her dies." Syrah's chains rattled as she leaned forward, her voice a low growl. "Leave him," she commanded, her tone filled with an authority that made even the guards falter. But then they laughed, cruel and sharp. "Or what? You're chained, beast," one mocked, pressing the barrel of his rifle against the bars. "You can't protect him." John's fear turned to fire. He stepped between them and the cage, his fists clenched, his voice trembling but firm. "Stop," he said. "She's not what you think." The guards blinked, then burst into bitter laughter. "Not what we think." One sneered. "She's a monster, and you're a fool who's fallen under her spell." One guard grabbed him by the collar, slamming him against the bars. Pain shot through his back, but before he could cry out, a sound filled the hangar, deep, thunderous, a roar that shook the walls. Syrah pulled against her chains, the metal groaning, her eyes burning like suns. "Touch him again," she growled, "and you will not live to regret it." For a heartbeat, the guards hesitated, their laughter fading. But then they smirked, forcing false bravery back onto their faces. "She threatens even now," one said coldly. "Proof enough she must never be freed." The other pressed the rifle harder into John's chest, his finger tightening on the trigger. John's breath quickened, panic surging. If they killed him, she would break free. He could see it in her eyes, the promise of violence. "Stop," John whispered desperately, looking at the guards. "Please, you don't understand." But they did not care, their faces hard as stone. One spat the words like venom. "By morning, you'll be executed for treason." The words struck like ice. Executed. The chains rattled again, the hangar trembling with Syrah's fury. Her voice lowered, not to the guards, but to him. "You must choose, human," she whispered. "Fear them or stand with me." The guards dragged him back, shoving him toward the door. His body shook, his mind torn in two. If he confessed, begged for mercy, maybe they would spare him. But if he denied her, if he abandoned her, she would never forgive him. And deep in his heart, he knew he could not turn away, not anymore. As they pulled him out of the hangar, Syrah's golden eyes followed, burning into his soul. Her final words that night rang louder than the clanging chains. "If you betray me, John," she said, her voice echoing like thunder, "I will never let you go." The guards shoved John through the dim corridors of the outpost, their boots echoing like drums of doom. His wrists were bound with rough cord, the pain biting into his skin. Every step closer to the command hall felt like walking toward his own grave. They had not even hidden their plans, whispering to each other as they dragged him along. "By sunrise, he'll be hanging," one muttered coldly. "The fool fed her," the other sneered. "He deserves what's coming." John's chest tightened, fear clawing at him. But behind the fear burned something stronger, the memory of Syrah's voice. "You must choose, human," she had said, her golden eyes filled with fire. And now he knew. He had already chosen. The command hall was dark, the air thick with smoke from burning lamps. The captain sat at the head of the table, his face stern, his eyes sharp like blades. The guards threw John to the floor, his knees striking hard. He was feeding it. One spat. We caught him with his hands full of stolen rations. The captain rose slowly, his cloak dragging across the floor. He looked down at John as though at an insect. "Do you deny it?" the captain asked, his voice heavy with contempt. John's lips parted, but no words came. His mind screamed to beg for mercy, but his heart refused. Finally, he whispered, his voice barely steady, "She is not a beast." The hall fell silent, then erupted in cruel laughter. The captain's lip curled into a sneer. "You are bewitched," he said, his tone dripping with disgust. "You let her poison your mind." He raised a hand, pointing toward the outer yard. "Take him to the gallows." The guards dragged him again, the cold night air striking his face as they pushed him outside. The yard was filled with shadows, soldiers gathering, some curious, some eager for blood. A wooden frame stood ready, the rope swinging in the wind. John's heart pounded, his breath shallow. This was the end, but then the ground trembled. A deep roar split the air, rolling like thunder across the outpost. Alarms blared, red lights flashing, soldiers shouting in confusion. The sound came from the hangar, from the forbidden cage. "Syrah!" The guards froze, their eyes wide with sudden fear. Another roar shook the walls, followed by the tearing scream of metal giving way. "She's breaking free," someone shouted, panic flooding the yard. Chaos erupted, soldiers running to grab weapons, commanders shouting orders, sirens wailing into the night. John's heart leapt, fear and hope crashing together. He knew this moment would come, though not so soon, not like this. The ground shuddered again, and then she appeared. Syrah burst through the torn hangar doors, her massive frame glowing with the shimmer of her alien skin, chains hanging broken at her wrists. Her golden eyes blazed like suns, her hair wild, her steps shaking the earth. The soldiers opened fire, the yard filled with flashes of red. Bolts of energy struck her skin, but she only staggered for a breath before roaring again, her voice shaking the air. She swung one arm, and a wave of force hurled soldiers aside like leaves in a storm. Fear spread like fire among them, their bravery shattered by the sight of her unleashed power. John fell to his knees, staring in awe and terror. She could kill them all. He knew it, but her eyes, burning brighter than the fire around her, locked only on him. With each step she took, the ground cracked beneath her weight. The soldiers screamed, some firing wildly, others fleeing into the night. The captain shouted orders, his voice breaking with desperation. "Kill her! Kill them both!" Syrah's gaze sharpened, her lips curling into a snarl. She reached out, and before John could react, her massive hand wrapped around him, lifting him gently but firmly into the air. He gasped, the world spinning as she raised him to her chest. Her voice rolled like thunder, fierce and unyielding. "He is mine." The soldiers hesitated, their rifles trembling in their hands. For the first time, John saw fear in their eyes, not of him, but of her. She clutched him close, shielding him from the storm of fire, her chains clattering as they dragged behind her. And in that moment, John understood the truth. She could have broken free long ago, yet she had stayed, waiting for someone who would see her not as a monster, but as something more. Now the cage was gone, the chains were broken, and nothing would hold her again. And she would not let him go. The night burned with chaos. Sirens wailed through the outpost. Soldiers shouted orders that were swallowed by the roar of fire, and the ground shook with every step of the giantess. Syrah held John tightly against her chest, her hand steady despite the storm of energy blasts striking her skin. John's heart pounded so loud he thought it might burst, his mind torn between terror and awe. She was no longer the silent prisoner in the cage. She was power unleashed. Bolts of red light cut across the darkness, striking her shoulders, her arms, her back, but she kept moving. The impacts scorched her skin, but her steps never faltered. Her golden eyes burned brighter with every strike. John clung to her, feeling the shock of each hit reverberate through her body, yet she never loosened her grip. It was as though she was carved from stone, unbreakable, unstoppable. The soldiers tried to regroup, forming lines across the yard. Heavy cannons rolled forward, their barrels glowing as they charged. Syrah let out a roar that shook the earth. She raised one chained wrist and swung, the broken length of iron whipping through the air like a giant blade. The cannon shattered into scrap, flames bursting outward, soldiers scattering like insects before a storm. John's breath caught, fear rising as smoke and fire engulfed the outpost. But through it all, Syrah's focus never wavered, her eyes fixed on the outer gates. "Hold tight, human," she rumbled, her voice shaking his bones. He obeyed, pressing himself against her as she charged. The gates loomed ahead, reinforced with steel and glowing barriers of energy. Guards scrambled to activate the full shield, their hands slamming on controls, their shouts desperate. But they were too late. Syrah hurled herself forward, her shoulder smashing into the gate. The steel bent like paper, the energy shield flaring before shattering into sparks. With one last roar, she broke through, carrying John into the open night. The desert stretched before them, endless and dark. Cold wind whipped across John's face. The stars glittered above like 1,000 watching eyes. Behind them, alarms still blared, gunfire still cracked, but the sounds grew fainter as Syrah ran, her strides long and unyielding. Every step carried them farther from the cage, farther from the gallows, closer to freedom. John buried his face against her chest, trying to steady his breath. His mind swirled with questions, with fear, with awe. Why had she saved him when she could have escaped alone? Why risk everything for a single fragile human? Her voice came low, almost a whisper beneath the roar of the wind. "I could have left long ago," she said, as though answering his unspoken thoughts. "But I stayed because I was waiting." "Waiting?" John managed, his voice shaking. Her golden eyes flickered down at him, fierce and soft all at once. "Waiting for the one who would feed me, who would see me not as a weapon, not as a beast, but as something more." His chest tightened, her words sinking deep into him. He had never been anyone special, only a worker, forgotten and replaceable. Yet to her, he was something different, something worth breaking chains for. Behind them, the outpost shrank into the horizon, smoke rising into the sky. But pursuit was coming. John knew it. Already he could hear the faint hum of engines, the shadows of ships lifting from the outpost to chase them. "They won't stop," he whispered, dread filling his voice. Syrah's lips curved, not into a smile but something sharper. "Let them try," she said, her voice steady as stone. "They will not take you from me." The ground shook as she climbed a ridge, her strides carrying them higher. From the top, John could see the wide expanse of desert stretching into infinity, dotted with jagged cliffs and dark valleys. For the first time, he realized how far they could run, how far she could take him. But even as freedom opened before him, The weight of her words pressed against his heart. She had chosen him, and she would never let him go. The wind howled, the stars burned above, and the sound of engines grew louder behind them. The chase had begun, and the bond between man and giantess was no longer a secret. It was a fire burning against the darkness, a fire that could not be put out. And as Syrah carried him deeper into the night, John understood the truth. His life was no longer his own. It belonged to her. The desert night was alive with the sound of engines. Dark shapes filled the sky. Outpost ships cutting through the clouds like predators, their searchlights sweeping the ground. Syrah carried John across the jagged cliffs, her strides unyielding, her golden eyes blazing with determination. But the hum of the engines grew louder, closer, and John knew the chase was far from over. Bolts of red light rained down, exploding against the rocks, scorching the sand. Syrah shielded him with her body, her massive arms curling around him as fire lit the night. The ground shook beneath her steps, dust rising in great clouds as she leapt from ridge to ridge. John clung to her, his breath ragged, his heart hammering. He had thought escape meant freedom, but freedom was proving to be a battlefield. The ships descended lower, soldiers shouting through loudspeakers, their words sharp and cold. Release the human and surrender, or you'll both die. John's stomach tightened, fear clawing at him. They did not want her alone. They wanted to use him, his life, now a weapon against her. Syrah stopped atop a cliff, the moon casting silver light across her figure, her chains clinking with every breath. She looked down at him, her face fierce, her voice steady. They would see you as bait. Nothing more, she said, but I will not let them take you. John's throat tightened. Why me? He whispered, the question breaking free at last. Her golden eyes softened, a fire of something more than rage burning within them. Because you fed me when no one else dared, because you saw me when the galaxy turned away, she rumbled. You gave me more than food, John. You gave me a reason to break the chains. Her words struck deep, and he realized the truth. She was no longer just a giantess in a cage, and he was no longer just a forgotten worker. Together, they had become something the outpost feared, something dangerous. The engines roared louder, soldiers rappelling down from the ships, their rifles glowing with charged fire. The captain himself stepped forward, his face twisted with fury. Last chance, he bellowed. Hand over the human, or we'll tear you both apart. John's body shook, his instincts screaming for survival. But his heart, bound by the bond they had forged, refused to give in. He looked up at her, his voice trembling but strong. I'm not leaving you, he said. Syrah's lips curled, her expression both proud and fierce. Then they will fall, she declared, her voice rolling like thunder across the desert. The soldiers opened fire, red bolts streaking the night. Syrah moved like a storm unleashed, her chains whipping through the air, striking down men and machines alike. She leapt from the cliff, landing in the midst of the attackers, the earth splitting beneath her weight. John held tight, the world spinning with fire and fury. Her roar shook the battlefield, scattering courage like ash in the wind. The captain raised his rifle, aiming at John. For a heartbeat, everything slowed. Syrah's eyes locked on the weapon, rage igniting like a sun. With one swing of her chain, the captain was hurled into the ground, his weapon shattering, his body broken. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of fire and the heavy breath of the giantess. The remaining soldiers fled, their ships retreating into the sky, unwilling to face her wrath. The desert grew quiet again, the stars burning bright above. Syrah lowered John to the ground, her massive hand lingering against his back, steady, protective. You are safe, she whispered, her voice softer now. John's legs trembled, but he stood, looking up at her towering figure. For the first time, he did not see a prisoner, not a beast, not even a warrior. He saw the one who had chosen him, and the one he had chosen in return. What happens now? He asked, his voice low, uncertain. Syrah's eyes turned to the stars, the golden fire in them reflecting the endless sky. "Now," she said, her voice carrying both promise and danger, "you walk with me, and I will never let you leave." John's chest tightened, fear and wonder mingling in equal measure. His old life was gone, burned away with the outpost and its chains. Ahead lay the unknown, a journey across worlds he had never imagined. But he was no longer alone. As the night stretched before them, man and giantess walked into the desert, their shadows cast long against the starlight. One human, one alien, bound by choice, by defiance, by something stronger than fear. A new beginning had dawned, and the galaxy would tremble to learn of it.